Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and Mike are Mike Connor and Mike Simmons. We need to know which voice belongs to which Mike, so let's start with Mike Connor.
Hi, Jody. This is Mike Connor.
Mike, it is wonderful to do the Catalyst Sale Podcast with you. Let's start with a bit about your background.
Thanks, Jody. I'm happy to do that. I'm Mike Connor. I'm one of the co-founders at Catalyst Sale. We started the company about 7 months ago. Prior to that, I've spent the last 25 years building sales organizations, being part of sales organizations, both as a sales rep early in my career and then evolving into sales leadership roles some 20 years ago.
And the other Mike is Mike Simmons. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Jody.
We heard from Mike Connor. Let's hear a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Again, this is Mike Simmons. My background is a little bit different than Mike's. My sales career started about 10 years ago. Prior to that, I was in a consulting role with a learning technology company. And before that, I was in an operations management role with United Parcel Service.
Okay, two different backgrounds. How did you meet?
Mike and I actually met about 8 years ago, and ironically, it was on Mike's final interview to join a company we both ended up working for. I met Mike during a lunch meeting while he was coming on board with a company called Safari Books Online. And at the time, I knew his VP of sales and was just casually meeting him for lunch, so I had no idea we'd end up working together, but that's when we first met. And then about 6 months later, I joined the company as well, and we've been working together closely for the last 8 years.
So you have an 8-year background together. You decided to start Catalyst Sale. What led you to that?
When Mike and I first started talking about long-term interests, developing my career personally, one of the gaps that I had wanted to address was the opportunity to build something from the beginning. As we started to talk a bit more about the concept of Catalyst Sale, this became a great opportunity to do that, to build something from the beginning. Jody, my motivation really was around building something. Over time, I had moved from the standpoint of, I think Seth Godin said this best when he talked about wantrepreneur versus entrepreneur. I had always talked about wanting to do something and looked at various concepts, whether they were related to personal training or individual service businesses. And it was through discussions with Mike about what we were seeing in the market that it became clear that there was value that both of us could deliver back to the marketplace in the concept of helping to build out educated sales teams, helping to accelerate the path to revenue for new organizations, and helping organizations minimize false starts as they launch their business.
For me, Jody, it was really about getting back into an entrepreneurial mode. I had previously owned a company that specialized in enterprise sales training about 10 years ago and really enjoyed the ability to work with a number of different companies. And though I had transitioned back into a corporate job for about 10 years, I really decided that this was the time to take advantage of the market opportunities, because what I saw happening in the market, a lot of the same problems exist today that existed 10, 15 years ago. And I thought this would be a good chance to get back into an entrepreneurial role.
Let's focus on this a little more, on why you started the company. What problem did you think you would solve with Catalyst Sale?
One of the major problems that we see in the space is founders who have a very interesting product, have a strong understanding of what their product market fit is, and have a market that needs the product that they're delivering. But they don't have the background in sales, either from an interest perspective, a capability perspective, or capacity. If they spend time working on ways to generate revenue for their organization, for the group that they're building, it takes time away from an area that they may be more interested in, which is focusing on building out their product.
We also started to hear from a lot of CEOs and peers of ours, primarily based in Silicon Valley, Northern California, some in Boston, that were part of startups that were trying to take that first step, like Mike said, but we're really having a hard time finding talent. And we're based in Scottsdale, Arizona. We've had a very tight network of sales professionals that we know here in Arizona, and we recognized an opportunity to help fill skill gaps that some of the more competitive job markets face on a daily basis. And we just started putting the pieces together where we thought if we could not only add value in how to get a sales organization started or how to implement technology and process, but we could also help with filling those roles with a lot of the educated talent that we have here that's available in Arizona.
We've all heard the term elevator pitch. If we met on an elevator or at a cocktail party and I asked you, what does Catalyst Sale do? What would you tell me?
Hopefully we'd be going on the elevator for about 32 floors, because getting down to a 2-second elevator pitch, we found that actually quite difficult because there's so many different things that we become involved in all of the engagements that we work on, everything from technology to process and methodology to hiring and so forth. So when people ask me, in short, what do you do? And I think my daughters are a great barometer for this, because if they don't understand what I do, then I know I've probably not simplified it enough. But what I tell people is we build B2B sales organizations and we accelerate the path to revenue.
When we think about B2B, just to clarify that, most people who are listening to the podcast will know this, but B2B, business to business sales. When we're talking with organizations about where we can help, I would summarize it in 3 areas. We identify gaps in their current process, people, or technology, and we implement solutions to address the gaps in those processes, people, or technology. And we will stay engaged with the organization for as long as it makes sense to hit their initial revenue goals. Our primary focus is on helping organizations get from 0 to 10 million or somewhere in that barometer, not as much on helping organizations go from 50 million to 200 million.
Where we've really found a niche is working with founders or companies that are really at that ground zero. One of the clients we're working with today, for example, is an international company that has been in the market for about 2 years. They've done a great job expanding internationally, but have had a real difficult time hiring in the United States. And part of that is because they lack the credibility to attract sales talent. They don't have a track record and they're a foreign company. So naturally, a lot of salespeople will be skeptical of that sort of company. So what we've been able to do there is accelerate their ability to hire a full team, bring them on board, train them, and get them up and running in less than 45 days. By having credibility, understanding the market, understanding the industries that we support, we're able to greatly accelerate the time it takes to get a full team up and running and then also generating revenue.
One of the things that you do that really intrigues me is help organizations create a sales culture. Can you speak to that?
So, Jody, I think you actually addressed this, or you hit on this in the introduction, which is that we are all about a thinking process. And I think one of the things that we like to do is build a culture around the ability to think. I think there's so many companies today that show or train their sales organization how to execute a process, but that process ends up telling them what to do every step along the way. And when you have that kind of culture where you're doing what you're told to do or you're told how to think, you really effectively become a non-thinking sales professional. And one of the ways that we build our culture is to support a thinking process, to say that we want you to be creative. We want you to think about your customers' problems. We don't want you to worry about executing step A through Z, but understand a process that you can apply your thinking to be more successful. And what we found is that if you give people the ability to think and to be creative, they're able to become much more effective with their clients because they're not worried about what they need to do next in their process, but they think about what they're actually doing with their clients. And that in itself is a very rewarding position. And what we're all about is creating a work environment where we can learn from the people that work for us, but also having them learn from the expertise and the years that Mike and I have both spent selling directly.
Just to add to that, some of the components that Mike was talking about as he was going through that is the importance of sales leadership. Leadership is not doing the work on behalf of your team. It's not providing a playbook that states this is how you're going to execute on your role. These are the specific questions that you're going to ask. But it's more about focusing on the concepts and the general objectives that we're trying to accomplish, and then giving the team the ability to be creative and take a creative approach to solving their customers' problems, to aligning the solution in the context of what's important to the customer.
We've gotten to know Mike Connor and Mike Simmons. We've found out a bit about Catalyst Sale and what the company does. But Mike and Mike, let's look at this podcast. What can people expect from the Catalyst Sale podcast?
People can expect practical information about sales that has been applied over a period of a combination of about 35, 40 years between Mike and I. We've been in the trenches. We've gone through the worst scenarios that you can run into with a customer, and we've gone through the best scenarios you can run into with a customer. We've gone through the worst scenarios that you can run into with members of your sales team, and we've gone through some of the best scenarios that you can run into with your sales team. So we will share that experience, we'll share that knowledge, and we look forward to feedback and questions that come from the audience.
Jody, what we really hope to do is share a lot of experience that Mike and I have gathered over the years. It's flown by very quickly, but I know that one of the reasons I had success early in my career was because I had really good mentors that I could depend on, that I could learn from. And I see a huge gap in today's workforce with that mentality, with the mobility that people have and the changes that occur in companies every day. It's really getting hard to find those mentors. And you can search all over the internet, you can search through networking groups. But at the end of the day, people still need that coaching and that help along the way, particularly early in a sales career. Our goal here is to share information, to share what we find that works, that's effective. We want to be able to give real-world experiences that we've gathered both from a client perspective and from building a team perspective. So our goal is to add value for that salesperson that is discovering enterprise sales for the very first time. We're here to help sales leaders that perhaps find themselves in a leadership position for the first time and just share experience and give back to the investment that people made in us early in our careers and become a resource that's concise, that's based on real-world results, and that really cuts through a lot of the noise that you'll find available today talking about sales. And whether that be social selling or focus on the buyer's journey and the things that are very in vogue right now, a lot of this stuff is just the same information being rehashed. And what we want to do is drill down to the things that work.
We'll also talk about hiring. We'll talk about firing. We'll talk about firing customers. We'll talk about traditional sales process items like qualification, validation, fit, feasibility.
Mike and Mike, where can people find out more about Catalyst Sale?
People can find out more about Catalyst Sale on our website, which is catalystsale.com. They can also follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @CatalystSale, and they can find out more information about the organization via our company page on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Mike and Mike. I am excited about what's coming for this podcast. I look at the list of topics we've got laid out, and this is going to be such a good show. I can't wait to get started. You can find the Catalyst Sale podcast on catalystsale.com, but also on iTunes, on Stitcher Radio, on Google Play. If you like what you hear, please leave a rating and review and share this podcast with your colleagues. Thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.